All right, we're live. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you another episode of Unlocking Age of Sigmar. This week we are doing the Orcs and Goblins, and I am joined by Warhammer Weekly's Ed McMahon, or I guess, wait, if you're a little bit, that's my age, yeah, there's my gray hair, or maybe we can go a little bit more recent. Who are some of the other notable, I guess, co-hosts in some of the big talk shows these days?
Yeah, I'll just go for Riker.
Riker, all right.
How about
there
that?
You go. I like that one. All right.
There you go.
That's all right.
I'll take
the resident Riker, Commander Riker of the Warhammer Weekly, Thomas Lyons. Thank you for joining me, Tom.
Thank you. It's great to be on the show.
Excellent. I appreciate you coming, and we're going to go and just take a quick look at a quick look with all the damn war scrolls in New York. It's like probably the longest one out of all of them. Maybe Chaos runs second, or I don't think Skaven was even this long. But Orcs and Goblins, the many units for the war scrolls and Orcs and Goblins.
And there's an irony here, because not only are there many war scrolls, it's almost like a 40-page PDF, but there's 30-some units that are included as substitutes in the back. So like not only is it one of the longest army lists, but it's one of the, it's just clear that just the abundance of troops. And there's an irony to this, and I'll talk about this of the divisions within this list. But yeah, it's a very, very long list.
So what we're going to do is we're going to try and break it out a little bit. We might do a follow-up video, same way I had done it with the Skaven with Vince. And the idea is that we'll go through the generic troops and the unnamed characters. If we have time, maybe we'll go circle back, and then we'll look at the formations. So let's take a dive right in. And of course, if we have any questions, if anybody has anything that they want to post, I'll do my best to get to it. Obviously within time constraints. And then of course, feel free to discuss afterwards once this goes and airs onto YouTube, if we can have an extended conversation there, there afterwards. So let's get to it. I'm going to go ahead and try and screen share and see if we can make this work. Let's see. So, and please help me with any. Let's see. So screen one, yes. Technology is easy. All right, can you see my screen?
Absolutely, I can.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go scroll down. Again, we're going to go past Gorbat and Azog. We'll go right to the Orc WARBOSS. And so why don't you go ahead and take the very first one?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. So the Orc WARBOSS, man, as far as heroes go, he is a meaty hero. And you'll see this with a lot of the Orc heroes, that they generally default at 6 wounds rather than the 5 that you see in a lot of other armies. And likewise, the Goblins default at 4 wounds. And so he has a great number of wounds that he's packing, a great save. His attacks, man, there's nothing to complain here. He's a 6 attack. If he's going sword shield, which, man, he's so good sword shield. 6 attacks at 3/3, -1 rend and 1 damage. With a 4-up save, rerollable save. He's beefy defensively, and then if you're throwing a great choppa on him, he's gonna or the massive choppa, he's going to be swinging around some hurt as well. So
yeah, I would go for the massive choppa just because of that -2 rend. Of course, D3 wounds doesn't hurt as well, but the rends really add up.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so I'll point out his command ability, and I'll talk more about this later, but what you're going to see in this army, more than almost any other army, I think I talked with Vince about this a little bit, and the Demons of Chaos ends up seeing this similar type of division. But this army, despite how big the PDF is, it is more subdivided as an army than I think almost any other army. Obviously, it has fallen into this category, but and what you see this is that there's the best word I would have for it is a ghettoization of if you're taking orcs, an orc commander, you want orcs. You don't want goblins. You don't want snotlings. You don't want trolls, because most command abilities are key to a certain troop type. in the entire war scroll. Like, so night goblins only buff night goblins, orcs only buff orcs. And so it's this really interesting division. And so we see the generic WOG ability, which is buffing orcs, which, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, I love the idea of throwing around one extra attack with all their melee weapons. Let me point that out. So, like, if you're running around with like savage orcs who have 2 different melee weapons, because they attack with a main hand, like a one-hander, and then a shiv offhand, which are 2 different entries. Each of those entries are actually going, so you're going from 2 to 4 attacks.
Yeah, that's huge. That's massive.
Yeah, they like, it is a wicked like ability. Like I said, the orcs fare very well in this war scroll. Some of the other subdivisions don't fare as well, but the orcs, if you want to go run straight, orcs are just fantastic, and this war boss is going to be at the front of the pack.
Yeah, I like, and just to go and run with what you're saying, I like the synergy with the orcs and goblins, where the characters really do almost more so dictate what units you're going to be taking because of those synergies, because of the command abilities, because there's a lot of synergies that we're going to see between special abilities if you're near a unit, for the heroes, if they're near units, and of course also with units if they're near heroes. So we'll go through that, I guess, as we'll go in. Obviously the Orc War Boss, you know, he's not I guess an insta pick, but the fact that he definitely does his job, and he is very killy and very tough. What do you think in terms of the comparison versus his 8th edition counterpart? And let's obviously discounting the fact that we can't do as much unique customization, but for what he does in the game with his abilities, what's your take on him? You think it's an improved, or maybe a little bit worse in terms of the effectiveness?
I think it's improved because, I mean, like, again, and I've talked about this on Warhammer Weekly, I am a sucker for passive benefits, like characters buffing other units and buffing other things. And man, you just don't get better than this war boss. You know, I had talked about throwing a boss choppa on him, but man, if you had just had one run around with the Great Wog Banner, which I haven't mentioned yet, which is their the equivalent of the Standard Bearer. Mm-hmm. Not only are you now if this is also your commander, because you could do that, you could have this as your general who is also carrying a Wog Banner. And he's going to, when he uses command ability, give all orc units within 12 inches 1 extra melee attack with all their weapons. And then the banner is going to buff all orc units within 16 inches to let them reroll wound rolls of 1. I mean, it just doesn't get better than this from like a buffing standpoint. This hero makes your army more killy, and that's what this army is about: is killing stuff.
Great. All right, let's move on in. Let's take a look. Okay, well, here's his counterpart, the Orc War Boss on a Wyvern. So slightly different. Slightly different in terms of the fact that it's obviously more of a monster. And again, I love the mechanic in terms of the diminishing capabilities as he gets wounded, but a little bit beefier. The big differences here is the monster itself. You got the venom for the Wyvern. So you have if it suffers a wound from its barbed venomous tail, at the end of the turn you roll, and on a 4 or more you get a mortal wound as it goes through its veins, and I think that's great. It's just another little add-on that if you do any damage to your opponent, you might actually run up the score there. And then the command ability WOG, let's see, it's any units that are within 12 inches when they attack, they're frenzied. So it's the same thing. Yeah. All we're really doing is we're jacking up this, and this is one of those unusual situations where typically it's a vastly different thing with the special abilities and whatnot. This is pretty similar. So I guess we can just move on to the next one. Yeah, go ahead. You have a comment? Yeah,
just a curious. So a couple things to point out. Like, so wyverns, man, they're not dragons, and I mean that in the like. Obviously, anybody that plays D&D and whatnot knows that. But
that's a T-shirt, by the way.
Yes, like you feel that here with only their 12-inch move instead of the 14-inch move that other like large winged like dragon like creatures have. And also, they're only at 10 wounds. Like, let me point out that the Orc War Boss running around on foot is at 6 wounds.
Yeah.
throwing him on this wyvern is only granting him 4 more wounds. Like, that's not a whole lot. And so, like, this makes him a little bit more killy, but like, I really have to start to question, like, what's gonna be the better benefit? Throwing a great weapon on the orc war boss and putting him on foot, you lose the mobility. But you're like, if you're playing in any type of comp that has a monster requirement, man, like throwing, like, you're only getting monsters for 10 wounds. And you're going to see this throughout most of this war scroll, is that most of the monsters in the war scroll only have 10 wounds, which, I mean, that's, as far as wounds on monsters go, that's a pretty low, it's on the low end of that monster scale across the war scrolls.
Yeah, it's a nice trade-off. It's a nice decision that you'd have to make, because I see exactly what you're saying. In a lot of cases, you'll have like a 12 or even a 14 on some of these really big models in some of the other army PDFs. But you know, I like that they broke it out and they gave it, you know, a little bit of a separation, because sometimes it seems like it's just there's no disadvantage to the separation between a monstrous mount and some of these war scrolls, and they're on the same war scroll. So it's really just there's no downside. All right, so let's go to the Great Shaman. Why don't you go ahead and take the Great Shaman?
Yeah, so interestingly, you see the standard amount of wounds on a hero, unlike a lot of the other orcs. So he's run a little bit less wounds. He has kind of the standard attacks of casters. So he has a WOG energy, which he's adding 1 to all casting rolls if he's within 20 or within 8 inches of 20 or more orcs. And you're going to see that this army really runs hot when it has lots of models, which is kind of a problem depending on if you're playing comp. If you're not playing comp, then I think that this army is banging kind of on all cylinders. But you end up bumping up against sudden death. So it's really kind of it's a real interesting place that this army finds itself in based on the rules. But you're going to see these if 20 or more models types of abilities. So that's on the Great Orc Shaman. That's on the Shaman's WOG energy, and then he has a spell, his Gaze of Mork, which is it can hit 3 units within 20 inches, which is not too bad. Casting value of 6 is not too shabby, especially if you're sporting a +1. And then each unit basically has a chance of either suffering on a 1 in 6 unharmed, a 2 to 5, they're only going to suffer 1 mortal wound. On a 6, it suffers a D3 mortal wound. So it has kind of the chance to do a lot of pain, but in general, it's just going to kind of spread out damage, which if you're trying to eliminate units, that's going to be a problem. But then again, you also, if you really want to, you can lean back on your typical arcane bolt for that type of thing. So
what do you think overall in terms of effectiveness in the game? Better or worse
than 8th edition?
Yeah.
I would say that it's worse, simply because of, like, these guys were running around with 3 to 4 spells from the Big Wog, which was just a fantastic lore previously.
Yeah.
And now his spells are fair, like all things considered, are fairly mediocre, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a trend we're going to see with a lot of these armies in general. When you look at the powerful magical armies, the ones that really had just incredible spell options in this game. If anybody is just tuning in for the first time, checking out AoS, a lot of those spells are distributed amongst the wizards now, where they're unique, and that is more of a mechanic and an element within AoS that diffuses that power, as opposed to making, you know, just in general the magic phase that much more crazy. But you know, this he has now the Gaze and Work, the foot, you know, will be somewhere else. We'll get to that. So yeah, he is diminished in terms of that comparison. I still think he's very effective, and as you said, there is a pull for this particular army, as well as some others, to really ratchet up the numbers. It can be a bit of an issue when you have to worry about things like sudden death. I also agree. You know, I'm not a big comp person, although I can see certain very minuscule comp rules that I would even institute, even just self-imposing, as opposed to what I think it would be the norm. And that could diminish some of the potential for this army. But I think that it works really well with these larger model count units.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Orc Bully. You know what? I'm not. I gotta qualify this. I've got to give a little disclaimer here. I've never played an Orc and Goblin army myself. I played against it, very similar to the Skaven, and but it's obviously a very popular army. The image of the Orcs and Goblins is kind of something that's a very, very long-term, old-school Warhammer. And I just love the flavor and the craziness of the army sometimes. And it's very killy. This army is very killy too, in different ways and different reasons from Skaven. But there's some units I just have never, ever seen. And that's just a testament to just how deep and how diverse the characters are and the character of this army is. I've never seen this Orc Bully on the table. And it has a function.
You have.
Maybe I just didn't realize
You
it.
have, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because the unit previously. It was an upgrade to all war machines.
Oh, really?
That's why you haven't seen it.
So,
yeah, this was an point upgrade that gave an extra wound or 2 wounds, I think, an extra wound to your war machines. And so, yeah, this is an interesting breakout, and I'll let you keep going. But
no, please. That's the reason why I wanted you to go and do this with me, because you have far greater knowledge with the Orcs and Goblins army. So go ahead, give me that perspective.
Yeah, so basically, rather than adding having an upgrade within units or not doing upgrade, they've made this upgrade into a hero that basically is like a passive buff to any war machines near you. Now, it's a really, obviously he's a terrible model. He doesn't do a whole lot. He's only 4 wounds, which for an orc hero is pretty terrible, let me just say. But the magic that he works on war machines is significant. I think within 1 inch of a war machine, they have this get back to work, not have to make battle shock tests within 3 inches for a goblin crew or grot crew, whatever. That's pointless. On the actual war machines themselves, which we'll see later, they get passive benefits for him being near within 1 inch, and it goes anything like upgrading damage from a D3 to a D6 to getting to make multiple catapult shots and things like that.
Really?
So, yeah. So, so here's my pushback. So, while I like what they did here, the problem is that if you're in any type of comp whatsoever, he's competing for a hero slot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to be running a gun line where literally in the center point of 4 war machines clustered around him, to make him possibly worth it if you basically run a gun line for that.
Yeah. I could see that. A lot of the comp that I'm seeing, which hasn't been outrageous, some of the outrageous comp that's trying to twist things to 8th edition, it's another conversation, obviously, has been, over the top. But even some of the hey, let's run a tournament with AoS, or, try to have some kind of a format so that, people don't go way overboard, still has a range of war scrolls that you can bring to the table. Sometimes you have a range of war scrolls in terms of sidebar that you can pick from. And in any kind of comp like that, as you say, I think that you're going to have to make some serious decisions by some of these guys who may be on the fence on whether it's whether you want to limit your overall choices. What do you think? Do you think that this gets negated in that kind of environment, or that it would only be really worth it in a free-form scenario where you don't have any kind of comp in just casual gaming?
I hit the table if there's any type of comp, if there's any type of decision to be made, let me say that. Because if you're just throwing models down and you really don't even have a war scroll count, throwing 1 model down is not going to be a problem. 1 war scroll, 1 model in the sudden death perspective. But if you're if he's competing for other heroes for slots, I think you'll only see him when you have a block of 4 war machines clustered around him. That's when you'll see the Orc Bully. I don't think that we'll see him otherwise. In any type of comp environment, just because you have to go all in to make him worth it, and then even then he can be sniped pretty easily. Got
it. All right. Yeah. That's something that's definitely going to need to be considered. I love the idea that they've broken this stuff out, but that could be a detriment. That could definitely be a downside to some of these characters. So we'll have to take a closer look at that. All right. So standard orcs. Okay, so we have the options of and there's one thing I've also noticed. There are so many options and this is just one of those things where I guess when the conversion from 8th edition, you had point structure where you could either take a shield and a weapon, or 2 weapons, or if you had a shooting weapon or whatnot. There just seems to be so many different versions of these units, so it's something that we should consider as well. And in this case, we're talking about some units can take a pair of choppers versus a spear and a shield, and a WOG shield, excuse me. The big difference here is do you want the extra tax for having choppers, or in this case, I think it's a re-roll of 1s when you're attacking, or do you want to have a situation where you want to have that extended reach of 2 inches? So fairly bland, but definitely there's a difference here in terms of the capability and the usage of these units. And of course, this is also going to come into play when we talk more in future unlockings about tactics and formations and such like that, where you might have two rows of these guys. One might have a spear. You might have the spear, the heavily mobile spearman sitting behind maybe a row of infantry, so that they can reach over or through, or however you want to play it. Definitely versatile, though. A very versatile unit. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, let me just point out real quick that so under standard bearers, these guys run the option of running either an orc banner or a skull icon. Because there's not points and there are not upgrades, there is no reason why you can't have both of those in this unit. And you're going to see that throughout, because it says this unit may be, models in this unit may be standard bearers, plural. So that doesn't mean that you can have multiple standard bearers, and one could have an orc banner and the other could have a skull icon.
Yeah,
and you're going to see that throughout this army.
That depends on how people read it. That's probably going to be a question that we'll probably see on Andy 2D6. Whether or not what's your definition of this particular situation? Because the way I read it is that and yes, I do agree that the wording obviously says that you can have, if you want, you can have a whole unit of standard bearers. But the way I particularly read it is that you have to make a choice, in the same way as you have to make a choice where the whole unit has one particular set of weapon type. And I think that even if you decide that it's okay, because the wording is pretty clear that everybody could be holding up a standard, or everybody could be a musician, it really should be one choice. I have been seeing a lot of the comp, which I totally agree with, where it's just pick one, and one guy. You could be the last guy that has the wound, but that's neither here nor there. I think we can go and save that debate for another time. But if you want to stick to the letter of the rules, clear. Yes, I could see that interpretation as well. But maybe we should save that controversy for another time, because it's going to be one of those debates.
I will say this, just from an English grammar standpoint. If you look at orc boss, that's on the singular. Unit is an orc boss. An orc boss makes 2 attacks. Where this is actually everything's plural. Models in this unit may be standard bearers, plural. And the reason, because you limit the power of these units. You're nerfing these units, and they may have been balanced around having both sets of abilities.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You know what? I've been sticking to the literal, rules as written as much as possible at this standpoint in my gameplay and in my interpretation. So we could stick with that as the and run with it and see what kind of not have a debate later. But I want to stay with as much the literal translation as possible until we unlock this a little more, and then we can start making judgments. At least that's how I'm handling it. I'm sure you guys are going to do your own way on Warhammer Weekly. And
at least with this unit, it's not that big of a deal. The orc banner is the normal bonus to bravery, and then the skull icon basically is on Will's Flee, on the roll of a dice. If you roll a 6, one of those models does what comes back.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, when models run away, however many models, you roll dice equal to that number of models, it looks like. And if any of them are 6s, those orcs stay. And that's a long shot from being immune to battle or anything like that. So I think it's a solid ability, but I don't think it's a make or break for this unit. That said, I think it's a good unit. It's a 4-up, 4-up with -1 Ren. So that's kind of the perk that they have over other standard infantry.
Yeah, I just think that they're kind of bland in comparison to the character and the fluffiness of some of these other units. They're solid. They're nothing. You can't say anything against them. But I think when you look at some of the other units, all things being equal, I would take the character filled units, maybe with one little an extra ability that may be more situational. These are just your generic tough orcs. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. All right, orc. Please tell me I'm not mispronouncing this if I butcher this. ARMOURED. So they're just armed with bows. All right, so these are your orcs. So we have, and I think I might have lost Tom for just a minute, which is okay. I'm going to go over.
I'm back.
Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, I'm going over the orc arrow boys. So that's their slang for arrow boys. Okay, and they're just orcs with bows. So they add 1 to hit if you're using a unit that's more than 3 inches away from the enemy. Now I see this recurring in other abilities with other archer type units, and I like this. I wish that this was kind of a generic mechanic in my personal opinion because of the idea. And again, we won't debate because it'll take too much time going into the idea of shooting in and out of combat and all that other stuff. But because of the way the rules are, I think it works. I have a little bit of uncomfortability. I had more earlier on, less now after I've played more than a dozen games. But the idea that they're a little bit disturbed by the fact that there are opponents nearby and their benefit, their concentration is a little disturbed. I think I kind of like.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree that these guys are pretty mediocre. I mean, like they're staring down like 5 to hit on their bows, which is pretty poor, all things considered. And they can drop that down to 4 up if they are more than 3 inches and they did not move. Like, so I am not impressed with these orc archers.
Yeah, okay. I think we agree with that. I think that they're going to be low on the totem pole, especially when we look at some of the other shooter units. All right, let's go down to the York Boar Boys. Take it away.
Yeah, I think that these are pretty standard cav. 2 wounds, 5 up save. They're much like most of the like the musicians and the standards are all the same. They can reroll failed wound rolls when attacking. If they charge, which is a little bit different than like the bonuses to like damage and whatnot for like lances and stuff like that. And it's pretty good, but you got to remember that you're getting some of this stuff passively from your buffing from your standard bearer. Because if you'll notice, like there's only technically at this point we've only ran into 1 hero that like 1 valid general if you're not running a character for orcs. Now we'll see a little bit more farther down, but like this is a duplication of the standard bearer ability. Only this is all like this is a conditional, although it's all wound rolls. So, anyways, and then they have the shield 5 up save, so they're okay. But I think that they're, as far as cav go, like I'm thinking about comparing them to like other cav and other armies, and they're just not real standout to me, is what I would say.
Yeah, I kind of like the when I look at them in and of themselves, not just necessarily comparing them to other cavalry. I look at 2 wounds, which is pretty standard for cavalry. I look at the 5 up save, not that dissimilar to other cavalry also. A lot of the cav that I've seen, maybe it's a 4 up in some cases, but a 5 up is pretty standard. 9-inch move, nothing to sneeze at. They're very mobile. But when I combine that with the other things, yes, I agree with you. It's not really, you're not really knocking my socks off with the reroll fail wounds, because you're going to miss a lot. And yes, the hits that you put in there, you're going to get. You're not talking about multiple attacks, except for the tusks on the warboars. But the rerolling of failed saves is a big deal for me. You throw up a Mystic Shield on these guys, they got a 4 up. You're going to be saving a lot of wounds, and they've got 2 wounds of pop. They're just not going to they're not going to be removing a lot of models. So yeah, I see what you're saying in terms of comparison to other cav. I don't think they're that bad. I think that reroll saves is going to come into play, unless you're dealing with a high rend or just lots of -1 rend type shots. But even then, you've got the meatiness of them having 2 wounds of pop. They're going to be able to stand in there. I like the mobility, but there are other choices I would take over them. Boar Orc Boar Chariots. This is a unit that scares the hell out of me. Because, and I'll tell you why. It's not just the fact that each chariot has 6 wounds. All right, we're talking about 6 wounds, 9 move, 4 save. We're talking about again, rerolling failed wounds. You've got the scythes, so you're doing die 3 mortal wounds once you complete a charge. You're doing die 3 mortal wounds to all enemies within 1 inch on a 4-up. That's pretty key. Before you deal with anything else, those scythe wheels are going to be a big deal. Here's the thing that concerns me, and this can be comped. We're going to see this in a lot when in some of the organized events that I see people that are generating. I'm actually looking to do one myself locally, where individual units might have wound caps. And again, I hate to bring in comp. It's so much a part of the conversation we're already having, just in this one session, but. These guys are 6 wounds apiece, and there's, you could have 1, you could have 5. If your wound cap is 24, 25, or as long as it's you can get 4 or 5 of these guys in there. That's a lot of wounds per, and the battle shock is not going to come into play as much, even though it's only a 6 bravery. You got it. It's going to take a while to drop these guys at a 4+ armor, unless you have a really good rend. It's going to be hard to get some wounds past them.
That's true, but remember, you're going to be running with these are basically on chariot bases, and they have to be, each chariot has to be within 1 inch of another chariot, and so navigating 5 chariot bases around the battlefield and bringing all of those to bear with like a 3-inch like closing the gap basically is going to be problematic. Just bringing all these wounds and attacks to bear with a 2-inch range on a chariot base.
It's a good point. I'll tell you what. I'm building with my son and his new ogre army the Mournfang Cav. Okay.
Yep.
And I've got one of the small bases that come in the starter set as an example of what I guess a larger monstrous Cav would be on, which is what I think a chariot would be on as well. And it's around. It could either be chariot base or those, I guess, the 60 by 100. I forget the exact dimensions. This base, the oval version of it. I mean, look, you could do the square. I'm mixing and matching, but for my sons, I'm trying to stick to the circular and oval because there's not a lot of model count. What is it? The celestial, or do you remember in the starter set what those creatures are? There's a corn monster, and then there's a guy on a lizard. What they're called? I don't remember, but I know what you're talking about. Okay, cool. Yeah. That particular size base is perfect for. I think it's too big for a regular Cav, in my opinion. You can put a chariot on it. You can put, and I know this is going to be sacrilege for everybody who hates round bases, but hey, if you're dealing with Age of Sigmar, you shouldn't care. But here's the point. More and more of these boxes we're going to see starting to be released with repackaging with new oval and circular bases. And if you want to try and emulate that, you can. So here's where I'm going. And I know, look, I'm long-winded. I'm sorry. It takes me a long time to get there. But here's the punchline. The edges, the front and rear parts of that will fade in. You can get 3 of those guys on target much easier with that oval base than you ever could dream of getting on a square or rectangular base. And I've already experimented with that when I was showing my son after we finished putting together 4 of his Mournfang. And I have those bases, and I started to look at the differences. You can get many more guys bunched in when you finally fold in, when you pile in with those bases. It's something to consider. Where the differences is in the rank and file, 20mm square bases are an advantage, in my opinion, over the rounds. It seems that there's little sweet spots for certain type of base size in terms of what you can get. And I'm taking into consideration here that there's no overlapping or stacking of bases, because anybody who wants to talk to me about that is going to get the hand, man. They're going to get the hand. Anything to add to that long diatribe?
No, I agree. Yeah, I would just say that I think people are going to be surprised having watched and fought against very large chariot blocks. Thanks, Vince. I understand the mobility limitations of things like that, and especially with pile in. Again, when you have a larger base and you're having to like pile in 3 inches, that's not a whole lot when you have very long chariots. So all of that to say, I think that there's going to be a mobility conundrum there that people are going to run into.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess what we're looking at here is that in and of itself could restrict the size of the unit to be able to make it more effective to get in there, just because of that concept. I see where you're going with that. Is that a battle report we might see, or is that just your friendly game playing?
Those are just friendly games of Vince stomping me. So.
Okay, we'll have to hear about those war stories another time. All right, let's move on. Well, actually, wait. First, quick reflection. Well, better or worse in terms of Chariot versus old edition versus current?
Let me just say, I love almost all the Chariots in Age of Sigmar. Like before, I was always leery of Chariots because of all the limitations, but I mean, Chariots now are meaty and they have great saves, and I love it compared to the prior Chariots.
Great. I think the mortal wounds option is going to be the thing that puts it over the top for me. That in of itself, the fact that you just can get the default, hey, you're going to take a couple wounds here, and not that you're just going to take a couple of wounds. Anybody nearby is a chance to take a couple of wounds. That could be very serious. That could be the big factor there. Okay. This is RUGLUD'S Armored ORCS, but this looks like this is a name thing. We can come back to it.
Well, this is actually not. No, like it is and it's not. It is a unit that is a named quote-unquote unit. It doesn't have any special keywords like hero or anything like that. And it basically has a mini hero baked into the unit.
Right. Okay?
So think about this like a Dogs of War type of thing, where this is like a named like unit of renown. And like pound for pound, this is one of the best units that you're going to see in the book. It's a 1 wound unit, so like if you have a wound caps of like 24, you can put 24 of these bad boys on the table. They're running around with crossbows, kata, and katas. The leader is running around with 3 wounds instead of 1. And he has multiple attacks. Like I said, he's a mini hero, and they're getting to shoot twice with their crossbows, and even though it's 5 up to hit, it's 3 up to wound. It's just a solid, nice group of orcs, is what I would say.
Okay, I like that. So now this can't be something completely new. It's got to be an emulation of what we've seen before. What do you think? Better, worse?
I think it's about comparable, is what I would say.
Okay, so we're gonna go past the famous, legendary Grimgor and go right to the Black Orc Big Boss. All right, and this is one of those classic, type of generic characters that you gotta know that's going to be in an orc army, especially an orc army. If you're going to be, of course, if you're going to be taking black orcs, I really like the black orcs. They're brutal, and I like the slaughter chopper. You get the I'm the best. You can, and I love the flavor of these guys. I really hope they keep it as they add new units and they introduce new units to Age of Sigmar. With the Age of Sigmar-ish, the Age of Sigmar-y theme. I really hope they don't go too far afield. But and that's one of the things that my son almost picked the orcs and goblins as opposed to the ogres, just because it just looked so cool and there was such funny stuff in it. Okay, so you're adding 1 to hit for the if he's within 10 inches. Okay, your black orc unit is going to get a +1 hit if they're within 10 inches of this guy, and that's a big deal.
No, it's the other way. This guy gets better if there's another hero nearby, because he's competing. He's competing with the other orc hero.
Got it.
So he's saying, I'm the best. And he gets bonuses to hit.
Yes, reading is easy. Let's see, if a big black orc uses this ability to keep in order. See, there you go. This is where he's oppressing his unit. All Iron Jaw units, and these are specific keywords, so that black orcs are included in this, that are within 5 inches of him. When they fail a battle shock test, they suffer 1 mortal wound, but then they are considered to have passed the test. I love this part. This is the flavor that I think is at least is retained within these PDFs from the old school Warhammer. The fact that he's basically slapping down one of the guys in the unit and saying, "You ain't going anywhere." They're going to take a wound. They're not going to run. So the same situation with that I'm the boss. I love that. He's tough as hell too. Not a bad bravery. 6 wounds, 4+ save. I think he's just as good as we've seen in the previous edition.
I don't think so. actually, and here's why. Because notice that keeping order command ability. So one thing that you'll notice that's completely absent from this war scroll is animosity.
Yes, that's right.
It's not here. Like, so one of my critiques was that I really hope they get rid of animosity for when we move into the new edition. Well, they did, and I'm happy about that. But what's happened here is that this command ability, notice, is the keyworded to Iron Jaws. The only unit in the entire book that's an Iron Jaw are Black Orcs.
Really?
So this goes back to, yeah, this goes back to that ghettoization that I was talking about, where this command ability only benefits one unit in the entire book.
At this time, we know that there's
Sure.
We know that there's going to be more units that are going to be released for all these factions. There's going to be new stuff that's coming down the pipe. Yep. So at the time, yes.
But again, and then only then it's reducing a battle shock by one wound. Where oftentimes you'll see command abilities like, why not? I mean, I guess like if you had a whole bunch of Black Orc units, you would use this instead of the command ability to make them immune to battle shock tests.
Well, no, they're only going to take one wound in order to not lose the potential for more guys fleeing. The difference is, of course, is that you're automatically losing. They're suffering one mortal wound. They're not suffering a casualty, which is the equivalent of 2 wounds minimum, because each Black Orc is 2 wounds.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But why wouldn't you why wouldn't you use the other command ability, which makes them immune to battle shock tests?
That's a really good point.
This would be all Iron Jaw units. So if you had multiple Black Orc units that are all in combat, that's when you would use this. Otherwise, if it's only one unit of Black Orcs, you're just going to use the normal command ability. It's going to make them immune to battle shock. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a fairly weak command ability as far as command abilities go.
It's a downgrade unless you have a very heavily themed Black Orc-oriented army. Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Well, hey, this is why I have you on, man. I need a pro who knows this army better than I do after just a handful of games and a few read-throughs.
No worries. No worries.
All right, take Black Orcs.
Yeah, so Black Orcs, let me just say that, under a wounds comp, these guys are terrible because you're only getting 1 model for every 2 wounds. Under a normal, if you're just laying down models and you're doing a sudden death model count, these guys are fantastic.
Yeah.
So it ends up like swinging both ways depending on what kind of system that you're in. There are 2 attacks, 4 up to hit, 3 up to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage, 2 wounds, 4 up save. They're just fantastic. They have to make the decision between an Orc banner or an idle icon of Mork. I think they could run both based on the wording, but obviously we've talked about that. And it works the exact same way where it can keep them from fleeing combat on a 6-up. And then it's interesting. These guys go WYVERN the best. So if there is a Orc hero nearby, these guys try to outperform the Orc hero, and they gain 1 to their hit rolls if they're within 6 inches of that Orc hero that buffs them.
I love it.
So yeah, so that means that they're a 3-up, -1 rend, 1 damage. So basically, these guys end up being like sword masters from high elves, which run a very similar stat array, but are only at 1 wound apiece. Nice. So they're a great elite troop, is what I would say.
Excellent. And I think even in a comp situation, taking 12 or 15 of these guys, because most comps I'm seeing are in like the 24 or 30, 25 wounds max per war scroll. I haven't seen anybody do 30, but I think 30 is where they should go, because some units really should have their opening ability at 30. But either way, I am playing also the multiple banner situation as I'm going literal on my interpretations. But I could see either way. I think it's still this is a meaty unit, and I think it still would be worthwhile taking unless you're going Goblins. Let's go to Savage Orc Warboss, because we're going to bypass Wurzog. So Savage Orc Warboss. Now, I love Savage Orcs, and I think we should probably talk about the Savage Orc overall theme, how it feels in this game with the synergies versus how Savage Orcs are in 8th edition. Maybe we'll just compile that after we go through all the different Savage Orc options. But I love the idea of Savage Orcs, and I actually think the Savage Orcs really work well in Age of Sigmar, just because it seems a lot of the units and a lot of the fluff, especially when it comes to humans, are just everything's turned savage. Everything. I've seen the dwarves or the Turgar or whatever they're called now these days are turned savage. Humans apparently are now the skittering little rat mice, running around cave type creatures that have been just pushed down on the brink of extinction. And these savage orcs, I think, just fit in that regard too. They don't have to be in some jungle environment. All right, so the war boss, he's got some nice stuff here. I think that the big thing that stands out here is the war paint. When you're dishing as many dice as you're going to see in a combat like in like an Age of Sigmar, we're doing lots of dice on when it comes to shooting, when it comes to magic. There's just dice rolling everywhere. This game is all about putting as many dice rolls on your opponent to make them make saves and fail as many saves as possible to incur battle shock. The fact that they have the war paint as a theme that runs through this army, where in some cases it's a 6-up. I think when we get to the Goblins, it actually in some cases it can be a 5-up. I love that, and I think that's something that even though it's only a 6-up, it's gonna have an impact. And I just love the fluffiness of it as well.
It's actually the war scroll that puts it's the formation that puts the Savage Orcs up to a 5-up.
Ah, okay, that's what I read. Okay, it's all a blur.
No, that's fine. And I would just briefly point out, again, the command ability is only benefiting Savage Orcs, Bone Splitters. So that's not like Forest Goblins. That's not anybody else in this similar style of space. But it's only this handful of 3 or 4 Savage Orc units.
Right. So if we took the formation, which we'll get to at the end, we'll rush to it if we start running out of time. Then this would probably be one of those options you would take over the standard one.
Yep.
Okay. The Orc Shaman. Let's get your thoughts on the Orc Shaman.
Basically, he's the same as the normal Orc Shaman, only he's sporting Foot of Gork, casting value of 6. And again, this guy still has a +1 casting value if within 8 inches of 20 or more orcs. It's 6. It does a D3 mortal wounds to a unit. And then on a 4-up, it does another D3 mortal wounds to that unit. I just think that's fantastic for damage. It's not decimating entire units per cast, but you know what? It's a toned down version of Foot that's still better than the Arcane Bolt. So right. I'll take it. And he's only casting 1 spell per phase, but I'll have him cast Foot all day long.
Yeah, and he's a wizard with a lot of wounds too, which we're seeing a lot of trend. And 18 inches is nothing to sneeze at. I think what we're going to probably see is things that are going to be released down the road might have a little extended range or be able to cast more spells and more unbinds. But I like that there's a little bit of less crazy on this. Foot of Gork tended to be just one of those absolute game changer type things. When it went off, it could just keep going. In this one, I think that the idea that you get one more shot and another die 3 mortal wounds is great, because there's a bunch of abilities in Age of Sigmar where you just keep going. If you could roll that 4-up, it just keeps on going, and that's outrageous.
Yeah, so, I don't know if this lets you continue to roll. Does that make sense? I think
it doesn't read as such, because you can see in the other ones it says you keep going until for instance, I'll give you an example. The Great Maw says specifically you keep going until the unit is wiped out. All right. Yep. In this one, it doesn't say that. It just says one reference that on a 4-up it stomps again. All right. It doesn't say that you keep going. So that the fact that there's that distinguishing that lack of that wording is what makes me think you only get that one time. You get that one extra shot for another D3, and hey, that's enough. Another D3 mortal wounds. You get a total of 2 to 6 mortal wounds here. That's not bad.
Agreed completely.
All right, Savage Orcs. Let's see. What did we got? We had the Savage Orc Shaman. Savage Orc, again, my favorite theme and look of this of this army. So they've got a lot of options. They got the Gnarl Fist, the Big Stabber, the Flint Spear, Stone Chopper. There's a lot of stuff here. All right, and you really got to think about what you need. They don't have a very good save, but at least they've got the tattoos that can help them. I love the options and the way, and again, the way I play it and the way I've recommended it is that you've got to make the choice. I don't know if how crazy people want to go as far as WYSIWYG is concerned. What you see is what you get, where everything has to be modeled appropriately. I prefer that, but I do a lot of magnetizing and I go a little nuts when it comes to that kind of stuff. But for an entire unit, I think typically even the guys, you know, legacy people coming over from 8th will typically have a unit, I mean, a large unit that will be all, you know, either have a bunch of different options so they can pick and choose depending on what they wanted for points in 8th edition, or they might have been specialization type units where they had, you know, they you know, some units could have great weapons, some units could have weapon and shield, whatever. Either however you slice it, this is a utility unit. You can do so much with these guys.
It's worth pointing out also that this unit doesn't have the standard bearer like statement of standard bearers may carry either this or this. In this are just another type. There are not only are there like is your Savage Orc boss and your icon bearers, but there's skull bashers, which I'm guessing are musicians, and then there's big stabbas. Those are different, like 4 different types. There's no decisions to be made here.
Yeah.
Your number of big Staba carriers are limited, obviously, by for every 10 Savage Orcs, you can have 2 of the 10 carry the big Staba between them.
Now, how would you model that? Are these just guys that sit between 2 dudes, like the dwarves carrying shield bearers?
Just a minute, I will show you.
Yeah, I definitely want to see this because I got to admit, I've seen units of Savage Orcs I've never seen, or at least never been aware of. I've never been aware of these guys. I mean, again, maybe I'm losing this stuff in this sea of green when I go play up against them. It's not like I haven't played against Orcs and Goblins, but I just haven't seen a lot of the these minute details. So my apologies to our viewers. I'm not an expert in Orcs and Goblins. That's why I bring somebody on who is.
Now, let me just point this out briefly, that I'm about to show you, like, remember mine is a forest goblin army that I've modeled to be like proxies for stuff like that. So I actually have 2 goblins carrying a big stab, or actually these are snotlings carrying a big stabba. But in the normal Savage Orcs, you get a chariot base, or not a chariot base, a cavalry base that actually, like, you're supposed to put 2 orcs on with actual Savage. So the big stabba. And so this is how I have it: is I have 2 snotlings running around carrying a mini howdah with a big old spear. This is actually, I actually have this set up so that I do magnetization as well. So I can actually use this as like a howdah for actual goblins as well. Awesome. But this is the front of the big stabba from the Savage Orcs. And so normally there's just a longer spear hilt that gets carried between the orcs.
Excellent.
So
I love it. I love it. All right, so some other abilities. You can add +1 to your hit rolls for Savage Orcs with extra arrows in the shooting phase, as long as there are no enemies again within 3 inches. They didn't move. That's another big deal. They can reroll failed saves if they have shields, which, you know, I mean, you got to 6 up. One thing a little bit of a negative that I feel about there's so many different versions of shields in this game. There's no standard on shields. Every unit has their own specific shield rule. They're frenzied, so if there's 20 or more models, they can reroll failed to hit rolls. That's big. That's really big. I guess that works for shooting. And does that work for shooting as well?
Yeah.
Do you think? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's big.
Yeah,
that's
because it doesn't say in the combat phase.
And you're going to get a lot of these guys. Yeah.
That's yeah. So you're going to run.
Good.
Well, you can do both. That's the funny thing, is that because you remember the big orc, like the big orc war boss.
Yep.
Is his command ability doubles the attacks of each weapon for the unit, and so. These guys are going to run around with stone choppers or flint spears and a bone shiv, if you read the description.
Yep.
So they're going to go from 2 attacks to 4 attacks, and all 4 of those attacks are re-rolling failed hit rolls.
Damn. Okay. That's huge.
They are as scary. If I would argue they're even scarier now, because like even that big stabba that they're running around with, that thing does 3 damage. I mean, that is nothing to sneeze at. As a weapon, and it's getting 2 attacks base, 3 attacks with the command ability.
Yeah, and even 5-ups re-rolling to hit. Now you're getting double attacks with that synergy. That's and you're going to have a bunch of these guys, even with a model cap with a wound cap in comp. Even if you will apply that, you're still going to have so many guys that these guys are going to do. They're going to do a lot of damage within range. So I think they're as good, if not better.
Agreed completely. Yep.
Okay, let's go. Savage Orc Boar Boys.
They're just like the prior Boar Boys. They have less armor. I want to point that out than the previous Boar Boys. But they're picking up the 6-up dice save, and they're basically the same across the board otherwise. So, yeah,
a little bit of a trade-off. They're probably going to take a few more wounds. Yep. Are they in any way more killy, or are you saying the stats are all the same?
It looks like the stats are all the same.
So yeah, you would take
if they're running
for theme. Yeah, for theme.
Yeah.
If you have
well, and you're required to take this as part of the formation. The formation requires you to have these guys.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the formation, so we'll get to those. All right, so Goblins. We're going to get to Goblins now. Before we get to Goblins, your final take on Savage. Now, I love them. I love them in general. I loved them in 8th edition. I love the idea of having those theme armies overall. But your take on the synergy with the Savage Orcs in and of itself, AoS versus the 8th edition.
I would say that I think that 8th editions, like I find that whole aesthetic compelling, obviously. But I think 8th editions just in general, all the good stuff in Orcs and Goblins generally is found in the Savage Orc stuff. So I'm all in. I love the AoS Savage Orc stuff, especially for running the formation. Because you can still get the 5-up ward save, and I think you get another round of frenzy of additional attacks again with the formation.
All right, let's move on to Goblin WARBOSS. You go ahead, take the lead.
Yeah. So this guy is a 4-wound hero with 5-up save, and so you're going to notice a little bit weaker of heroes when you get into the Goblins, which is not real surprising. He has the ability to basically divert wounds on a 5-up to another unit and make other units take the wound instead of him, which is kind of a fun survival mechanism for Goblins. But again, let me point out that, like, while that's good and that's fun, and I love the flavor of it, mechanically, like, I just, like, you need more models in order to make this work. You need to have excess models, and you know, like, even though he's not taking the wounds, another unit's taking the wounds, and that's decreasing their effectiveness. And so if you're running like sudden death rules, like this army requires you to be laying down large numbers of models, is what I would say. I want to point out that their Goblin bravery did not take a hit this edition. Goblins in general, like, this guy's sporting a 6 bravery, which is just about as good as most of those orcs. I think it's the same as most orcs.
That's a surprise. Wow.
Yeah, like, a lot of people, like, I expected them to take a hit on bravery, and they didn't. So Goblins are pretty strong from that perspective. He has a lot of standard abilities. He can bonus the bravery and attacks of all melee weapons of a Goblin. So he's kind of like the generic orc boss, but he does basically the same thing with Goblins, and only Goblins, and not just any Goblins, because it doesn't work with Forest Goblins. Only the generic Goblins. It doesn't work with Night Goblins. It only works with the generic Goblins who have the tag get mob. So, and that goes back to what I was kind of talking about with the ghettoization. Like, again, this is a good commander for generic Goblins, but not for Forest Goblins, and not for Night Goblins. So take it for what it's worth. If you're laying down normal Goblins, you're going to lay down one of these war bosses. If you're not laying down normal Goblins, you're not going to put one of these war bosses in your force.
Yeah. It's good. It's a very theme focused on this on the Orcs and Goblins.
Yep.
and it's heavily steers you towards formations, which just so you know, a lot of the things I'm seeing, at least some of the sensible comp scenarios for some, you know, fledgling tournaments or you know, those who are just trying to get it and see, you know, test it out, are also saying that formations can break some of the natural limits in terms of numbers, which I like. But that mostly helps units that have like monsters and stuff like that, so they can get a few more with whatever benefits they have. But I don't think it really helps in any way these large, you know, the focus on large units and large armies that that is kind of the staple of armies like the Orcs and Goblins. It's just, it's one of those inherently large model count, big swarms, big mobs, and I think they get a little bit neutered in that capacity. And I'd love to hear from any viewers if they have a viewpoint to the contrary. If they have ways, or they would mitigate some of that, what we're seeing, where they would build up armies that would actually be more to an advantage in terms of equivalent model count. I'd like to hear from you guys. Okay, so Goblin Shaman. Now, it's very similar, obviously, in the same capacity as the Orc WARBOSS and Orc Shaman, but with the Goblin theme. This one, I think the only thing I'd want to mention, because a lot of this stuff is pretty similar, is the sneaky stabbing. And again, I love it. It's very specific to Git mob Goblins, but the idea that whenever that unit attacks, their weapons seek the enemy's weak points and add 1 to their wound rolls, but they don't just add 1 to the wound rolls. This is the kicker. They also get an additional rend. So if they've already got a -1 rend, that -1 becomes 2. If they have no rend, if they get a -1, I love that. I love that that enhancement, in my opinion, is really brutal. It can really add up, especially considering that a lot of the Goblins, many of them don't have across the board rends. They maybe only do 1 damage. Maybe they're only wounding on a 5+ in a lot of cases, sometimes 4+. The idea that they get that extra bonus, I think that's a big equalizer in my eyes.
Yeah, agreed completely.
Okay, so generic Goblins.
So let me just I'll briefly just note the significance of this. These guys are running around with bows and melee weapons.
Yep.
So unlike a lot of the orcs, and on 10 or more goblins, which you will have, because by default, they have 10 models, they go to a 5-up save instead of a 6-up. And this is where the model count really kicks into overdrive, because at 20 models, this unit adds +1 to hit. At 30 models, this unit adds +2 to all hit rolls, and that's melee and ranged. And so that means that you can have a block of 30 goblins running around with a 3-up to hit, and if they get hit with that sneaky stabbing, 4-up to wound and with -1 rend on both their bow and their slash attacks. I mean, it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I want to. I don't need to go off on a tangent here, but I keep mentioning this comp thing, and it's obviously heavily on my mind because I hate the idea of comp. But since people are self-imposing it, and some organized events are doing it, it's obviously still present, because obviously I'm looking to take part in some of that and just test it out. And but if you're gonna do that, whether it's self-imposed or you're organizing an event to yourself, please don't stop at 30. I mean, stop at 20 or 25 or whatever. Let it go to 30. Some of these units, the reason why you want to get them to 30 is because they get, at least allow them to get that outside option, the extra pluses to hit, the extra attacks, whatever it is. There's a reason why they have it. It offsets their disadvantages. They're 1 wound guys. They have, a mediocre or poor to hit and wound options. They may not have a lot of other deep capabilities in their abilities, but the volume that with there are other restrictions that you might have in your event, it helps them achieve their needed and ultimate potential with the decisions that you have to make as an army builder, as a list builder, to be able to get them to that 30 or 30+ mark. I think it's worth it to have it as an option. And the way I've been doing it is that maybe it takes away a war scroll option. If you have X amount of war scrolls you can bring to the event, but at least allow for the opportunity, however your mechanic is in your event, so that people can make a decision if you want to have a big goblin army and they want to have 30 or 40 of these dudes, so that they can try to unlock those extra abilities. Because that's where I think these guys, mob units like this, will have greater potential on the battlefield or achieve their ultimate aim on the battlefield.
Agreed completely. Completely.
I'll put away the soapbox. Goblin Wolf Riders. Okay, 12-inch move. I mean, that's phenomenal. I mean, Goblin Wolf Riders, they fell like in droves, but every time I went up against them, I heavily respected them. They absolutely achieve, they achieved their aims in almost every game I played against them, and I never took them for granted. I took them for granted, and I always regretted it. I never really appreciated them as much once I hit the table. So that 12-inch move is a big deal. Now they're 2 wounds each, so they're beefy. They are definitely beefier now than they used to be. only a 4 bravery. Big trade-off. 5 up saves, not so bad. So when you're considering that, all right, so let's take a look at some of their abilities. Their hornblowers add 2 to the run rolls. So when you're not charging, you're going to be going that 12 plus another 2 to your die 6 that you're adding on to runs. These guys can book. They can go up to, let's see, a 20 inches on a run. You cannot sneeze at that. That is awesome. So unit standards. You can add 2 to the bravery if you have the standard. Let's see. All models in the unit as long as there's no enemies within 3 inches. Okay, that's pretty standard we're seeing here. I was just saying as you were away that these guys have such long. All these the Goblin Wolf Riders. We're going to talk about this with the Goblin Chariots. The fact that they have a potential for a run that can go up to 20 inches, that 12-inch base plus 2 to the run potential roll, they really move. And the fact that they're now 2 wounds a pop, a respectable 5 up, which is pretty standard for a lot of cav, and the ability to still dish out some good damage. I mean, 5 ups to hit, not such a great thing. 5 ups or 4 ups to wound, only doing 1 damage, not such a big deal either. But the fact is that they're more survivable than before.
Absolutely, and just looking at this, so let's say you had a pack of 10 Wolf Riders. They're going to be a 4 up to save 2 wound models that are throwing out 2 bow attacks and a melee attack if they're in melee. Mm-hmm. That's nothing. I mean, yes, they're all on 5 up, but that's still nothing to really sneeze at.
Yeah. Now the big thing for me, one is the spear's 2-inch range. All right, you add 1 to wound if you charge, but here's the really big one. 6-inch pile-in, not 3.
Yeah. Yep.
Granted, they're cav. Okay, whatever base you put them on, they're still cav, so they're going to be reasonably. It's going to be hard to get a lot of them in there. But that's a long range for a pile-in, and it's going to make it much harder for your opponents if they want to retreat to get away from them too.
Absolutely. I mean, again, you got to remember these are wolves, so it's the wolf pack collapsing on the enemy.
What do you think? Better or worse than previous version?
I think that they're serving a different function now. Before they were chaff and they didn't really serve anything different. Now they are a real cav unit that's at a 4 up save with 2 wounds. And so these guys they're kind of meaty. Again, their offensive power isn't real strong, but you throw a bunch of these into a block and ram them into something, and they're going to last a lot longer than a goblin horde.
Yeah.
I think that they're just doing something different, and I think that is noteworthy. They still have a huge move, but they're just doing something a little bit different than the prior model, and so it's hard to evaluate those things given the difference in function of what they're doing now.
Yeah, I like that they're a little bit more scary or dangerous or a threat. They have a greater threat range. That's a big deal. All right, Goblin Wolf Chariots.
It's interesting. It's a 4 wound chariot. That's a little bit weaker. It's only a 5 up save, 5 bravery. But again, they're running around with a bunch of bows, and there's a number of attacks here. They have this interesting ability called Loping Charge, which you can reroll dice when determining how far this unit runs or charges, which is kind of a neat ability. But the more significant thing is that this ability buffs, or this ability, their special ability grants this to other Wolf Riders and Grot heroes riding giant wolves. Nice. And so this chariot becomes a buffing unit for other units within 8 inches of these chariots. And so this is more of a support chariot that is going to give bonuses on rerolling those charges that you may have failed, which just gives those Goblin Wolf Riders even greater range than they had before.
So you're going to see the chariots sticking with the Wolf Rider units then.
Yep. You'll probably have it running parallel with a wolf pack, or having a wolf pack on each side of it, and all 3 kind of running together.
Nice, I like that. All right, let's go to the Spear Chuckas. All right, we're into the War Machine section, so let's see how much we can get before we go into formations. How much we can get through. So, why don't you start off with this Spear Chukka? Tell me what you think. Yeah,
so you're running with a crew of 3. It's throwing out 2 spears around, 4 up to hit, 3 up to wound, -2 Ren, D3 wounds. That's just fantastic. And the reality is that if you're shooting at a hero, they're getting +1 to hit. So This is great for hero sniping. And if you have that orc bully nearby, you re-roll failed hit rolls.
Nice.
So this is basically, if you're shooting at heroes with an orc bully nearby, they're throwing 2 spheres up into the air at a 36-inch range, both at 3 up to hit, re-rolling both of those hit rolls. They're going to land a hit. They're probably going to wound, obviously, 2/3 of the time. And it's at -2 Ren D3 damage. If you want some character snipers, these are it.
I think all the war machines are character snipers now. I think that the idea in this game is to take, you have to really make a decision on characters versus units versus war machines, again, versus monsters. I think that some of this limitation of 0 to 2 characters is really just to limit your learning of the game. But I think that the game actually, these types of units mean that you really need to take either mounted units on monsters or more of the characters, because they're going to be magnets for these things. And even if you limit the amount of war machines you put on the table, every single turn, the only thing that's helping you is full line of sight blockage. These guys are scary. Any of these, some of them don't even need line of sight. So we'll get to that. I'm sure that
Yep.
applies into this army PDF too. But that's a big deal. Heroes are very, they got to be very scared on the battlefield in Age of Sigmar.
And it's noting that these guys don't have range on this. They're throwing bolts in your face.
Yep.
Out to 36 inches. So
that's right.
war
No
machine,
minimum range. Oh, I didn't see that.
right. A lot of these have minimum range. These spear chuckos do not. So if you try to charge up on them, you're probably going to take 2 bolts to the face before you get there.
Very nice. I like it. Okay, let's get to the next one. The rock lava. Oh, I love rock lavas. All right, so yes, here we see it. You get a minimum range 6, but it goes further out to 40, which is going to be a really good portion of your table. Not so bad. I mean, there's only 3 to wound. In terms of the number, the roll to hit, obviously it depends on how much crew there is. I love, by the way, that these machines all move. All the war machines move depending on how many guys you have on them. I really like that because that can help change the landscape. I mean, you change how you navigate your army, at least in a small sense, that you can actually move, even if it's just 4 or 5, 3 or 4 inches rather. Okay, but the roll to hit, 3 up, not bad at all. To wound, 3 up, again, very respectable. The -2 rend is awesome, and a 3 damage. That's crazy. You're going to fail on more often than not, especially against characters, even if they have that 4 up save. You're talking about 6s now. If they're in cover, it's only a 5. But 3 wounds is going to hurt.
Yeah, and not only that, like, let me point out that if you're shooting at a unit with 10 or more models, they're 2 up to hit.
Yep. And what's this? Loaded again. If you have an orc bully within 1 inch, that's what you were saying, that they can then take 2 shots. Oof. That's a scary point.
Roll a 6. They're going to throw another rock up into the air.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen at least once in a game unless you put a real cap on the limit, real limit in terms of number of turns, which we only see in certain scenarios, by the way. Okay, yeah.
This siege gets. I was gonna say this siege is really scary. Like, realistically, just Goblin Siege was scary before. It's still scary. That's the reality.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been saying, if you're looking at comp, don't just put limits of 0 to 2 war machines, 0 to 2 monsters. Give some range of options that covers the range of different monsters. If you're inclined to put any comp in, which again I'm not at this point, but I see that it's going to come. Why don't you put something like 0 to 4 either monsters or war machines, so people have the option to take more of them if they don't have an option of the other, or if their options of the other are not quite as good. That way they have a greater range. And I just don't think that this game with 4 monsters or 4 war machines, this is a killy game no matter what you put on the battlefield. But I don't like the idea of neutering in general. But if you're going to put some limits on, allow for more freedom of selection. Anybody who's viewing it, who's thinking about this type of stuff. Okay, I'm going to let you go to the Doom Diver. My favorite war machine of this entire army. Every time I go up against it, an 8th, I just terrifying. It always seemed to work against me. I was always a victim of the fucking Doom Diver. But the idea, excuse my language, the idea of it is what just cracks me up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you're running around with a. Let me point out, by the way, that this is it's a catapult like the other previous catapults. Only you're running with a 4 crew rather than the 3 crew in the prior edition. So you've picked up a wound with this new edition. It's a 3-up, 3-up, -1 D3 damage. But if you fail to roll an attack, you can roll dice on a 4-up. They can basically auto hit another enemy unit within 10 inches.
Nice.
So on your normal, if there's somebody else in the area, on a 4-up, you can auto hit somebody else. Pretty fantastic. And if you're running around with the orc bully, he picks the fat goblins to throw to the Doom Diver, which means that your damage goes from a D3 to a D6 on it.
Yeah,
that's happening.
That's
at a 50-inch range, you can reach out and touch somebody.
It's crazy. That's almost the whole battlefield. That's crazy.
Yep.
You put that in the center of the board on your side, and yeah, you pretty much have the whole battlefield. That's great. Yep, it's just as scary being on the other side of the table from this thing as it was before.
It was, although it's functioning differently because like before like all of its damage was effectively mortal wounds. Like previously, it ignored armor, and now it's only at -1 rend, and that doesn't get any better. Yeah. So, I like it. It's good. But it's only throwing back into the air every time. Yeah, I mean, like put it this way: I would have one of these on the table, but I would probably put rock lavas down before I put one of these guys down.
Okay, so you think these are a little bit worse than the previous version?
I think yes. I think that the previous version had a very specialized role, but when it served that function, it performed in that role beautifully, and that was removing like heavy cav, like 2-up save levels.
Got it.
Now this is just basically a catapult that one attack that does a D3, where you could take a rock lava that has 1 attack, does a flat 3 damage, and actually has a chance of shooting a second time with the same number of wounds. So I would probably put rock lavas on the table before I put Doom Divers.
Got it. Okay, let's move on to Nasty Skulkers. I love these guys. Okay, now I've never gone up against them, and I don't know why. It's unfortunate, but in Age of Sigmar, I'm really looking forward to seeing them skulk out from nowhere and really put a hurt on something. You put them aside, so they're kind of like a reserve or an ambushing type unit, and then you can bring them onto the battlefield. I love this right in the early bits. If you roll a 6 when you're rolling to hit with a Nasty Skulker's backstabber, you have to hit the foe right in the early bits. Do not make a wound roll. Instead, that target suffers a mortal wound instead. All right, look, I don't really anybody who's not getting a chuckle out of some of the really funny and wacky stuff in Warhammer before are not going to appreciate it now. I did. I always have. I never played those armies, which is ironic. I loved playing against those armies. It wasn't my cup of tea in terms of what I put on the table, but I loved seeing it, hearing it, and having these crazy things happen. This is the kind of stuff that just tickles me when it comes to Warhammer. Maybe I shouldn't use the word tickle.
What I would say is that you may have faced these. Again, these were upgrades. And that these were actually in Goblin units, normal Goblins. So, like, you know how Fanatics were upgrades for Night Goblin units?
Yes.
These were the upgrades for normal Goblin units.
Okay.
And they popped out, and they basically had Killing Blow, and they were basically like hero. They were assassins, basically, like Dark Elf assassins that were baked into normal Goblin units. But most people ran Night Goblins, so you ended up probably running into Fanatics instead of Nasty Skulkers. I think these guys are usable.
I probably also ran into probably the 6th or 7th shrink during the game, so I probably forgot about it in the details at that point.
Yep.
God, you were saying.
Yeah, and these guys are good. They're fun. I would probably run them. They're going to pop out, and they're going to murder some people. They have basically the equivalent of poison attacks. If you roll 6 to hit, they're going to basically auto wound, mortal wound, which is pretty good. But again, even those 2 attacks are only 5 up to hit, 5 up to wound. So They're going to be fun. They're going to pop out. They're maybe going to do a little bit of damage if you have them in big enough numbers, is what I would say.
Got it. Okay, let's go past Scar Snick, and let's talk about the Night Goblins. Now, Night Goblins, that's not the theme of your Goblin army, is it?
No, minor forest goblins.
Okay, got it. Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people do Night Goblins as a theme. Okay, go ahead.
Well, and I just briefly point out as we're moving that this goblins, the Night Goblins have lost the get mob keyword, and they've picked up the Moon Clan keyword.
Got it.
And so all those previous buffs from the previous Goblin heroes and casters don't work on Night Goblins. That said, I think Night Goblins are fantastic. I think they're one of the most well fleshed out of the armies that I think can be some of the most competitive. Like if you're putting down a competitive like army, I think that they're going to be one of the strongest Night Goblins are.
Why don't we do this just in terms for time's sake? I don't know how much time you have, but give me your take on the Night Goblin units in general. Any real highlights in terms of command abilities or specific abilities, and then we can move on to some of the further units further down, so we can try to get formations in before we have to bolt.
Yeah. So I would say that the big thing is the Night Goblin Warboss command ability. I want to point that one out. I want to actually point out two things on here. The first is their command ability is it causes double damage. And like on a roll of any wound roll of 6 from a unit that you buff that inflicts double damage. And so if you have a large enough unit, and like I'm pretty sure some of the stuff that you're going to run into later, so what's going to happen, I can already tell you what's going to happen, is you're going to hit a unit of fanatics with this command ability, and those fanatics are just going to go buck wild across the battlefield. And we'll get to fanatics later, because I love fanatics in this edition.
I love and hate them, but I love them.
Yep. So they also have a really interesting ability that units that target a Night Goblin Warboss that treat all hit rolls of 6 as a 1 instead. And that's a really interesting thing, because let's say that you only hit on 5-ups. That means that you actually only hit these guys when you roll a 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So like Night Goblin Warbosses have a really unique ability that you don't see show up anywhere else. And it's pretty scary, in fact.
All right. Let's see. Night Goblin, go ahead. Yep. You keep going.
Yeah. I'll just run through these. So Warboss on the Cave Squig, you're gonna basically, he, like the previous one, gives buffs to other squig hoppers.
Right.
And he increases the movement of your Night Goblins. But again, this is all focused on Night Goblin buffing. The Shaman, he throws out a. They also are drinking or eating the mushrooms before they cast in this edition. On a 2-up, they're going to add 2 to the casting roll. On a 1, they're basically going to trip out hard and not do anything for the turn. So I really like what they kind of worked in here, where it's an all or nothing, a 2-up to your casting. Curse of the Bad Moon is a fantastic damaging ability. It does a D3 mortal wounds, and then roll a dice for each other unit within 6 inches, and then on a 4 or more, that unit also suffers a D3.
Yeah,
so
that's great for clusters. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you like, I can imagine staring across like a gun line with a Night Goblin Shaman who is just going to throw out one of these Curse of the Bad Moons, and it's going to just jump, stirring their war machines again around those heroes. And you just hit somebody on the edge, and you're just going to hit basically the entire grouping, have a chance of throwing wounds on all of them, which is just crazy. Yeah. So, yeah. Those are the Shamans. The base Night Goblins are just drop dead sexy. They're
netters.
I mean, honestly, well, like, hold on. Let's start. Like, so they're a 6-up armor. Okay.
Yeah.
If you run with moon shields, which you're probably going to do,
yeah.
You're going to be 5-up. And if you're running a Bad Moon icon, which technically it goes back to the standard bearer like situation, in addition to running a flag, they can also run a Bad Moon icon, which increases the save rolls of 1 during the shooting phase. So these are 5-up armor, 4-up against shooting.
Nice.
And so so they're just they're pretty solid, honestly. And then the netters obviously are going to reduce hit rolls by 1 during close combat phase of any mini models within 2 inches. So they're going to be basically they're throwing out a Nurgle buff, a -1 hit Nurgle buff.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I love the Night Goblins, and inside the Night Goblins can hide the Night Goblin Fanatics, which are the real scary thing in this force.
Yeah.
Fanatics get released just like previously. You set them up, they're in hiding, and then basically at the start of any charge phase, you can release the Fanatics. Any charge phase, including the enemy's charge phase. Set up the Night Goblin, let me point that out. Set up the Night Goblin Fanatics within 1 inch of the unit that they're hiding within. They can then charge, even if it isn't your charge phase. So you can throw these guys out and charge them during the enemy charge phase.
It's just
okay.
trying to duplicate or emulate the old mechanic, but it works. It really does work.
Yep. Now, let me point out that these guys are each model is throwing out a D6 attacks at 4-up hit, 3-up wound, -2 rend, and D3 damage.
Oh God!
These guys are monsters. You're gonna watch. Honestly, you're gonna see a group of like 10 Night Goblins run out onto the battlefield and launch a unit of 24 Fanatics. Like that's gonna happen, and it's gonna be terrifying. Yeah, there's no reason not to. They can hide. They hide in skirts. Yeah, they hide in another unit. Yeah, you choose instead of setting them up normally, you set them up. You designate a Night Goblin unit that they're set up within.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and they're gonna come flying out of here. They're gonna come flying out and just do hit like a Mack truck. And if you roll double when determining their the distance, you're gonna lose one basically. But they're gonna roll 2d6 inches. If you roll doubles, you're gonna lose a Night Goblin Fanatic.
Oh my God, I can see that being tremendously abused. Even with some comp of wounds applied, I totally get what you're talking about.
Like a 30 pack of these Night Goblins shooting out of another Night Goblin unit. And technically, let me point this out. I'm pretty sure that if they don't get deployed on the table, they don't count against sudden death. Right? I mean, like that's how this works.
Well, I'm not sure. I have to go over that. That's a good point. That's another thing that I have to probably go look at the exact wording, because I know that there are some units, because I think you're still deployed if you're deployed off table, because I did that with the Stormcast Eternals, and I haven't posted those battle reports up, and we looked through it. And the first time I played against an opponent, his entire army basically was off table, but he did have sudden death in his favor because it was his model count. Even though if they're off table, they're still considered deployed because they're held back in reserve. They're part of your starting army, or at least that's how I read it. But I'll have to go look at it. You might have a point there. There might be something there,
because it's models added to your army during the game. For example, through summoning, reinforcements, reincarnation, and so on, do not count toward the number of models in the army, but must be counted among the casualties.
I think you're right.
So, yeah, so you're gonna have like a bunch of units of 10 Night Goblins, and then out of each of these, are gonna fly like 24 Night Goblin Fanatics that don't count against your total for sudden death purposes.
Oh my God.
And are swinging around D6 attacks, -2 rend, D3 damage.
That makes a Night Goblin army just hideous.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, these guys are going to be brutal.
Oh,
so you're welcome. You're welcome, YouTuber community, for pointing that out. So anyway, so Squig Hoppers are okay. They're cav. They do decent. I'm gonna try to keep pushing on.
Sure.
Squig Herders. The Squig Herders, they have this weird synergistic relationship between the Squig Herders and the normal cave squigs. It's okay. So basically, Squig Herders are going to run around with either prodders or noisemakers. They are terrible at attacking, but they're going to subtract. They're going to be harder to hit when cave squigs are near them within 5 inches. So it's going to be hard to kill the Squig Herders. I'm going to jump down to cave squigs real quick. So how that's going to work is that you're going to have a bunch of cave squigs. They're 2 wound models, cave squigs are, with 6-up save, 5-up to hit, 3-up to wound. They have the Moon Clan keyword. So like these cave squigs are going to benefit from any other Moon Clan buffs. They're -1 rend, D3 damage. So they're going to be putting out a decent amount of damage. They're 5-up to hit, but you can if you have a Night Goblin Squig Herders within 5 inches, that 5-up hit's going to go to 4-up from your making them angry.
Yeah. That's nice.
And then One running and charging, they can reroll dice if there's squig herders near them.
3 bravery.
Yeah, 3 bravery.
Gotta be a downside somewhere.
Yeah, and that's why you have a general that makes them immune to battle shock.
Absolutely.
And then basically when they flee, they start eating other units nearby, friend or foe.
Nice.
And so they kind of, it emulates that blowing up. I'll jump up to Mangler Squigs. This goes back to what I talked about with monsters having low wounds. Mangler Squigs only have 10 wounds, but those 10 wounds are scary 10 wounds. They're throwing out like 6 base attacks from the Squigs, 2d6 chain attacks. Remember, because these basically have 2 fanatics attached to them.
Yep.
And then 4 bash and sticks as well. So you're throwing between 12 and 22 attacks out from these guys, doing anywhere from like the big squigs are going to hit on 2+, wound on 3+, -1 run, 2 damage, and that's for 6 of the attacks. The 2d6 attacks are like the fanatic attacks, only instead of doing a d3, they're doing it just a straight 3 damage.
Sweet.
So hitting this unit with that double damage command ability is really scary, because they have 2d6 attacks let's say you throw out 12 attacks, 2 of those are going to do, on average, you're going to roll 6s on 2 of those, and each of those attacks are going to do 6 damage with -2 rend.
Wow, that's sweet. Yeah. You want to have one of these. You want to have one of these in your army. You always did.
At least. Yep. And then if you roll doubles, you can add 1 to the model's hit rolls when it attacks with the ball and chains. So those, like, the ball and chains are going to be hitting that one that I just said is doing 3 damage. Is going to hit and wound on 3 up if you roll doubles on your movement. I'm sorry, on the charge range. I'm sorry. And then they bounce around, and when they are slain, they can cause a bunch of damage, obviously, in the kind of the death throes. But let me point out that they're a low wound monster. This is a 10 wound monster, so it's on the lower end of that. It's going to do a lot of damage when it's on the table, and it's run around at 3d6 move. So this dude is bouncing around. Like he has a very large potential range. He's not always going to do that, obviously, because of the because of obviously the normal limitations.
Randomness. Let's go bounce over to some of the spider stuff.
Absolutely.
On a gigantic spider. Okay.
Unfortunately, there are only 3 Forest Goblin units here, because again, these guys have lost the Get Mob and the Moon Clan keyword and picked up the Spider Fang keyword. But among those 3 units, they are fantastic. So the big boss is a 6 wound Goblin hero, who's a 4-up save that rerolls failed saves. Okay, so he's going to be sitting on the table for a while. On a 6-up, so the Goblin has 4 attacks and the has 4 attacks. The Spider's 4 attacks. Any of those 6-ups, any rolls of the 6 onto hit will auto do mortal wounds, which is pretty fantastic, and that upgrades through different stuff throughout the army. And then he also can move across. He ignores terrain for movement. And his command ability is all Spider Fang units within your army within 8 inches of this model. I think may include this model as well, since it's a Spider Fang. I don't know, because it doesn't say all other Spider Fang units. It's just all Spider Fang units. So rules as written seem to suggest that this would buff himself.
Yes.
And that Spider Venom ability will inflict on that more auto mortal wound on a 5-up instead of a 6-up. So him and all other spider units on their the spider bite attacks auto wound on 5-up.
Nice. All right, let's take a look at
the Spider Riders. Spider Riders are like standard cab. They're only at an 8-inch move, but they're a 6-up save that goes to 5-up basically when they have more than 5 models. Right. They have the auto spider bite, and they're ignoring terrain. What stands out to me for the Spider Riders is that they're shooting 2 bow attacks, they're stabbing with a spear, and then they have the 2 Spider Fang attacks. So these guys, even though a lot of their attacks are hitting on 5-up, they're throwing out a whole bunch of attacks, and some of those are auto mortal wounding on 5-up.
Yeah, I like
Yeah. And then I'll jump down to the Ragnarok, my baby.
We gotta talk about the Ragnarok. Everybody loves the Ragnarok.
Yeah. I am going to hopefully within the month have 3 of these fully assembled and painted. That's kind of my next big. I just got my airbrush in today, and I'm going to be diving in on my Ragnarok. So
awesome.
This is one of the only 14 wound monsters in the army. It's a 4-up save. Decent range at an 8-inch move. Obviously, it's not a flyer, but he's a crawler. His spider venom, which is you're going to get 4 bow attacks and a flinger if you don't have a shaman. If you don't have a shaman, you're going to get a flinger, which is going to be a mini catapult. It's a 4-up to hit, 3-up to wound, and it does a D3 damage. You're going to get 4 spear attacks, and then you're starting out. You're going to get 8 leg attacks and 4 fang attacks.
I like that it's 8.
Yeah, it's a well, and as you take damage, those number of legs goes down.
I would magnetize the legs and pop them off as they took wounds. That's just me because I'm insane.
Unfortunately, the actual spider's weight rests on those legs.
I would have a solution for that. I would definitely have.
Fair enough. The spider venom on this guy, when his bite hits, he does a D3 mortal wounds instead of just 1 mortal wound. So it's worth noting that when you are running with the big boss spider, this is going to happen on a 5-up. And for the formation, let me just briefly mention that when these guys are in formation, you add 1 to the wound rolls, so it becomes a 4-up. They do a D3 wounds on their bite.
All right,
there are 4 attacks.
Let's talk about that formation really quickly. This is a Ragnarok spider formation.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Oh, well, wait. Hold on. Let me jump down real quick. So if you're running one of these with a wizard on it, he gains a spell with a casting value of 4.
Which one is this? This is Spider Fang Venom Mob?
This is Gift of the Spider God. So this is you can have a shaman on an Ragnarok, okay? And he casts on a 4, and you choose a unit within 8 inches, and that unit, the number of mortal wounds inflicted by their bite is doubled.
Oh,
so that D3, that 4-up bite that you're going to do 4 times on an Ragnarok does a D3 times 2 wounds.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about the formation. The formation basically is the only 3 units that Force Goblins have in this book, which are the Spider Riders, the Ragnarok, 3 Ragnaroks, and a Goblin boss on a giant spider. And in addition, so you're going to add 1 to the wound rolls of all the bites. So if you're running the general and all that, everybody's going to be going to auto wound with their bite attacks on 4-up, doing mortal wounds. Okay, like all of your units, all of their bite attacks are going to auto wound with mortal wounds on 4-up, and all units within 8 inches of an Ragnarok are immune to battle shock.
Well, it should be because if this is your army, which it would fill up a lot of caps that people are looking to impose, which again I'm mostly against. But you're going to have a lot of big singular models. It's not going to come into play as much. But for the Forest Goblin Riders, those 3 units, you need some protection because otherwise you're just going to get wiped out with battle shock.
Yep, they're 2 wound models, 5-up save. And they're at least immune to battle shock within 8 inches of a Ragnarok, which is pretty scary.
I love this formation. I love formations like this because this is how my son inadvertently picked his ogre army. It's 9 models. 9 models.
Yep. I mean, I'll be honest though. I have in my box right now, my paint box, at least 30 Spider Riders. I might have 40 at this point. I can field a fairly large force of very battle shock immune cavalry.
I love it. Oh God. See, now this is the kind of thing that would make me want to just buy like one of these formations just to have as an option, as opposed to in years past in previous editions, you'd have to buy the whole friggin' army. I love it. All right. You know what? Let's go backwards. Let's talk about these formations and work our way backwards because I know we're going to start running out of time here. The Great Moon Clan.
Actually, I can actually wrap up everything else fairly quickly if you just want to get through there. Snotlings are Git mobs, so these are base Goblin army. bonuses. They're 4 wound. They're 4 wound models. They're basically going to be on little swarms. They're going to have 4 range attacks, 5 melee attacks. They're okay models, what I would say, but they have 10 bravery, so they're not going anywhere. If you're doing large masses of Snotling mobs, the Snotling pump wagons are war machines in this edition, which is interesting. It's a 4 wound war machine. And in general, it like out of everything that took a hit, pump wagons took a huge hit. And pump wagons are one of the only units that actually pump wagons and the normal Snotlings actually get buffed by having orcs nearby. So it's one of the only like cross faction or cross like sub faction synergies in this. Yeah. Yep. So but overall the Snotling pump wagons really aren't anything to write home about. So it's really kind of unfortunate. Trolls. There are 3 different types of trolls, and they are meaty. Each unit or each model has 4 wounds. They're going to throw out a spit attack and 3 melee attacks. And they are going to, on a 2-up at the beginning of your hero phase, heal D3 wounds.
I am so angry about this. My Cryptards used to be comparable to trolls and a little bit better because they were undead trolls. Now trolls are better. They're better at being trolls. I guess they should be.
They're so good. And not only that, like base trolls are the way to go in my opinion because they're too dumb to die. On a 4-up, they just stay on the battlefield with 1 wound remaining. Like that's just fantastic because you know what that means is that 1 wound remaining troll is going to heal a D3 at the start of your next turn.
Yep.
So he may go back up to full. A block of base trolls are a scary thing now. Stone trolls, they have the one better save, and they have kind of the mini magic resistance on a 6-up. But I don't think that they outperform the base troll. River troll, it's the same thing. Like they have a 5-up save, they have -1 to hit. But I love that too dumb to die. So if I'm fielding trolls, I'm probably going to just field base trolls. I'm not going to field the river or the stone trolls. A giant, you have a 12 wound model, and let me just say, looking at the giant set statistics, I want to run this bad boy. Like I want to stomp.
I ran 2 of them. I ran 2 of these guys against the Stormcast Eternals with a Thunder Tusk and 5 Bulls and a Butcher. The giant. It's not as good when you look at it on paper, but it is scary. First of all, if they get wound early on, they're going to be the magnet to every attack, every shooting, every spell possible, and they should, because if they do enough damage, if they survive, and if you have 2 of them, they are going to start. I just love the idea that they swing their clubs and they just do 3d6 damage. And yes, if you do a couple of wounds to it, it's going to drop to 2d6. But these giants are phenomenal. Their headbutt. The mighty kick, all these are great attacks. They're respectable. 3-ups or 4-ups to hit, 3-ups to wound. The rend really is a big deal. That headbutt is a phenomenal thing for -3 on the rend, and the damage can be just awful. But of course, they got to get into combat, and they have a decent move. 8-inch to start, and it goes down as they start to take wounds. But I will say this: their ability to stuff them in the bag. People have been getting this wrong. When I got it on the table, everybody's talking about picking up a dragon and stuffing in it, picking up Bloodthirster and stuffing in it. Here's what it reads. I'm going to read this. Immediately before a giant makes its attacks in the combat phase, pick an enemy model within 1 inch and then roll a dice. If the roll is at least double the enemy model's wound characteristic, it is grabbed and stuffed in the giant's bag for later. The enemy model is treated as slain. This is typically going to be a rank and file guy. It could potentially be a character if it doesn't have a lot of wounds. But I will say this: this is not going to be your big monsters, your characters or heroes riding on a monstrous mount. There's just not enough wounds that they can roll with 1 die. You have to roll double the model's wound characteristic. But here's my question to you. I'm not sure if you're still with me, Tom. Because I see your static image. Okay, cool. Your opinion, does this count versus the movement characteristic as it's listed on the War Scroll, or does it count as it gets weakened? Because that's the debate we had, and we settled on it's the wound characteristic as it shows on the war scroll, not the diminished war scroll. It's just the movement characteristic. It doesn't have an impact if you take wounds. What's your thought on that?
Yes, your wounds characteristic is the number on your sheet, by definition. Not on, like, I'm pretty sure if you look at the beginning of each of these war scrolls, when it maps out what things are, like on the key, the characteristics are what that little box is by definition.
Got it.
And so the wounds characteristic is what is printed on the sheet. So you are not picking up dragons and stuffing them in your bag,
which is
no matter how many wounds they're currently at.
That's fine with me, because you know what? If you were able to, I got to tell you, I'd be having a dragon's tail and a little bat wing coming out of a bag on one of these giants, and I'm going to get a third giant for my son. It's going to happen. But either way, yes, there is a limitation. It's not quite as crazy. Giants are awesome, especially when they fall. And my favorite part is the stagger, the drunken stagger on a charge. If you roll, it's the same thing as if they die, where you basically suspend, much to any of your opponent's chagrin. If they have a really nice model with this gigantic, a giant model hanging above it, don't drop it. But it's the same thing that you roll off. And I got to tell you, it happened in the game where one case it worked for me, one case it worked against me. But he can just fall over when he looks to charge. Oh, it was in the slaying aspect it happened. But in the charge, he still could fall down, and that could hurt you. That could fall over on your own troops that are nearby. And he just gets up and continues on his way. I love it.
Yep. Now, like, we've reached the end of the units, so let me make a brief note. I talked about kind of the ghettoization of this army, where everything's kind of subdivided. These last 4 units don't share any keywords other than destruction with the entire rest of the force. Okay, and so the none of the trolls and the giant don't share any of the goblin, the green, like any of the keywords that are kind of associated with that. And so one of the things that I think is problematic is that, like, there's no difference realistically, other than like the fact that it's on this scroll, between me taking this unit and me taking like ogres, in a green skin army.
Got it. So while you're dealing with your own little night goblin, my thoughts on the army, just as a wrap up, and we'll get your thoughts as well. I love it. I think it has a tremendous amount of character. I think there's some dangerous synergies, and I think that there's some fun that you can have, but there's the competitive nature of this army is still there. I think that there's some units are going to be a little bit different in terms of how you might use them, but I don't think we've lost the really overall feel of what an orc and goblin army is. Some slight adjustments, certainly some adjustments to trying to use the mechanics for Age of Sigmar, but I think if you like the orcs and goblins before, I think you're going to love them as much now, if not more. It's just a matter of whether or not you're interested in the Age of Sigmar, overall, world and mechanic. And if you are, if you're not, then I don't know why you're here. But if you are, I think you're going to love this army.
Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. And I think that, man, like, I love them, but some of this frustrates me because before you had goblins running with orcs, and the orcs were kind of the bullies pushing the goblins around, the fodder around, and orcs were the tough ones. And the mechanics of this game now are stick to your own people. Orcs need to run with orcs. Goblins need to run with goblins. Night goblins need to run with night goblins. Never the twain should meet. Otherwise, you're just building a subpar force.
Oh no, it's not a very PC army anymore.
No, it's not. If I want to run a forest goblin army, I have 3 units to choose from. If I want to run a night goblin army, I have like 6 units to choose from, 6 or 7 units. But so there's out of all of them, I think the orcs and the moon clan, the night goblins, have the largest range of troop choices out of all of them. It frustrates me that before I had proxies of proxies for savage orcs and proxies for black orc units that were going to be Forest Goblin proxies that were on the base size of orcs. And now, like, why would I ever do that? Like, I'm not going to do that generally because I'm just going to run more of the things that are going to all kind of synergize together.
Yeah.
And so that would be my one critique is that, like, again, I use this word, like the ghettoization of this army.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right.
And
well,
WOG only shows up. WOGs only show up on the orc armies. They don't show up on any of the goblin stuff.
oh, you know, I hadn't even noticed.
So like,
that.
and so there's like there's just certain elements that have seemed to have been lost in translation with this army. And again, like what I'm looking forward to at the end of the day is I want to see some more Spider Fang units. I want to see some more Forest Goblins. I want to see some more, you know, like very large, like Spider Riders or you know, netters running around with like Forest Goblins running around with like webs as netters and stuff like that. Like the potential modeling stuff, like there's a lot of hope that I have for you know, GW moving forward on this.
Yeah, I see that for a lot of these armies. I absolutely see, and I've been hearing from pretty good sources too about what's coming down the pipe, and a lot of it is reboxing of stuff. So, you know, repackaging, maybe new artwork, probably the same kits. Maybe there are some differences where, you know, we might be seeing. I know the Sylvaneth are going to be that. They're supposed to be coming out, and those battalion boxes have disappeared, not just on the website, but a lot of the ones that were on auctions and at barter sites. But the idea of either repackaging old units, they could have some different changes, maybe some edit formations, but new units that can take into consideration some of the themes of these older units, but add more flavor to the army. And I would love to see those types of individual army types within Orcs and Goblins also get fleshed out. Hey, Tom, thanks so much for joining us. And I really appreciate your insights. You know, I'd love to have you on again. Maybe we can go over some of the special characters. And I'll be watching. It'll have to be after hours, but I'll be watching Warhammer Weekly. Anybody, I should have said this in the early stage also. Anybody who's watching here, if you don't know already, and you probably do, if you're a viewer of mine, you're probably a viewer of Vince and Tom's, tune into Warhammer Weekly Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Great stuff all around, and awesome. I appreciate it, Tom. Have a great day, and goodbye. Bye, little night goblin.
Say bye. Thanks, Mitch.